In a historically rare move, believe it or not, Republican legislators in the state of Florida have helped Governor Ron DeSantis further solidify his power and force his will on voters in the state. They're giving him the power to draft a new congressional district map in the state of Florida. So how is this all going down? Well, the decision announced jointly by Senate President Wilton Simpson and House Speaker Chris Sprowls comes 2 weeks after DeSantis vetoed a congressional map approved by the legislature and called state lawmakers back into a special session to create a new plan that would be to his liking. And so in a memo to state lawmakers, Sprowls and Simpson said that the legislative staff are not drafting or producing a new map to introduce next week. Instead, they're gonna do something else. They're just going to empower the governor to draw up the map of his liking. And as you can imagine, there are a lot of fears about that. And I think those fears are certainly warranted. A DeSantis redistricting would more than likely result in Black and brown communities having their power diminished by essentially diluting their vote, right? The way that these district maps are often drawn, it's intentionally made to disempower communities that are predominantly Black and brown. And we have some, honestly, foreshadowing signs here. So while DeSantis has not produced a new congressional map since the legislature made its final version, his general counsel, Ryan Newman, had earlier offered a map that experts say would have reduced Black and Hispanic voting strength in congressional districts. And that raised new questions about DeSantis's commitment to the fair districts standards of the Florida Constitution. Oh, really? Does it raise questions? Are questions raised? Yeah, it definitely. I mean, obviously he didn't like the previous congressional map as it was drawn by state legislators. And now he gets to do what he wants. And it's a problem, especially since if it gets challenged, what's likely to happen? It might work its way through federal courts. It might end up in the Supreme Court. And with conservatives dominating the highest court in this country, things are not looking good for anyone who wants to preserve whatever's left of our democratic process. DeSantis also provided a 7-page analysis, making it clear that he thought the majority Black congressional District 5 should be eliminated. So, Francesca, it's raising questions. Questions have been raised.
Yeah, it's a little too early to tell. Just eliminate a predominantly Black congressional district, but who knows? Maybe it'll be better. It's incredible to me the power that governors have received over the last, I don't know, even just under Trump, just seeing all the ways. I mean, I'm thinking even back to Scott Walker, right? Like the ways that they have been empowered and emboldened to just run roughshod over their own legislatures. And so even when they already have a GOP dominated legislature. What more do you want? That was an agreed upon bipartisan map. And it shows to me that obviously we understand that Republicans know they can't win without cheating and without gerrymandering. They can't win elections anymore. They certainly can't win the popular vote on a presidential level, but on a congressional level, they resulted in gerrymandering. The problem is the 2020 census just came down. And remember how we thought it was gonna be like doomsday, terrible, they were just gonna Trump and was just gonna add a bunch of white people that didn't exist and undocumented people. Turns out it seems like that census wasn't as bad as expected, and in fact, took some districts away from predominantly Republican-leaning counties. And so, what do they have to do? Oh, they got to make it up by on a state level, just gerrymandering and going back.
That's right. Yeah, that's really important context, and I think you're right about that. And it also shows you how little these politicians really believe in our system of government, because this is obviously on a state level, but even within a state, you have a system of checks and balances. You have the governor, who's effectively, the executive in that state, and then you have, you have the legislature, and you're supposed to have that system of checks and balances to ensure that too much power isn't, solidified in one branch of the government or the other. And in this case, the state lawmakers have decided to give Ron DeSantis even more power to make a decision, make decisions that have an impact on the outcome of elections. And that is a disaster. Again, it is so clear that they don't believe in our system of government. They don't believe in checks and balances, and they certainly do not believe in small government. The only context in which they do want small government is when it comes to corporate regulations, when it comes to taxes, when it comes to anything that has to do with our economic system benefiting people at the very top. This lopsided, capitalistic system that they fight so hard to protect. And the way that they fight to protect it is to prevent any real regulation from going through. Now, DeSantis is already receiving outside pressure on how to draft a new congressional map, which should not be surprising to anybody. Those affiliated with Trump's Make America Great Again movement, like radio host Stephen Bannon, put pressure on DeSantis to demand a map that gave Republicans additional seats in Congress at a time when the balance of power hinges on outcomes in just a handful of districts. And Francesca, final thing I want to say about this is, you don't even have to question. They just tell you what they're doing.
Yeah.
It's so brazen. And they know that there will be no consequences.
And then Democrats are like, well, I don't know what we should do. Ooh, should we give Joe Manchin another coal mine? Should we let him have more tax write-offs? I don't know. Like, it's just so sad because they have their Machiavellian plans. The right knows exactly how they're going to further entrench minority rule, right? Like, as if the Senate didn't already do that, then you get gerrymandering in the House. And like, just to remember, Florida is diverse. 26% Latino, 17% African American. It's a diverse state. You gotta do a lot of work to silence a lot of voices, right? And then of course, progressives and leftists and grassroots organizations are the one footing the bill on like, we have to overcome all kinds of voter suppression and these new districts that are being drawn in order to have a fighting chance. And yet that fight is still worth it. But man, it's just like, we're not getting help at the top, right? There is no plan of defense. Last thing I'm gonna say, this is how you appease and you pander to Trump and Mitch McConnell. They're gonna love you. I don't know if DeSantis and Trump are like heading off for a grand duel on who's gonna inherit the MAGA movement. But honestly, this is something Mitch can get behind, and this is something all the MAGA folks can get behind. Because no matter what, pro-insurrectionist Republican or a Liz Cheney loves redistricting in Republicans' favor.
Oh, totally. Liz Cheney, to her credit, is a respectable member of the right wing that's trying to like completely dissolve our democratic process.
Right.
She does it in covert ways, not overt ways. She's not a big fan of trying to overturn an election through a, storming of the Capitol or rioting. Certainly in favor of rigging elections to her party's favor by redistricting. And I think that's an important thing to bring up, because while she, has really tried to brand herself or present herself as someone who's above the fray of the Republican Party, she's very much within the fray. She's just another flavor of anti-democratic garbage in this country, and we shouldn't ever help her rebrand herself because she doesn't deserve it.
Thanks for watching The Young Turks, really appreciate it. Another way to show support is through YouTube memberships. You'll get to interact with us more. There's live chat emojis, badges. You've got emojis of me, Anna, John, JR. So those are super fun. But you also get playback of our exclusive member-only shows and specials right after they air. So all of that, all you gotta do is click that join button right underneath the video. Thank you.